Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Fantasy Football with Scott Morgan, the Motor City Madmouth, and Ryan Skolrud. And Ryan, now we actually look like we're official. We may be 3,000 miles away, are we?
Yeah, hey, it's nice to actually be able to see you and as I'm talking to you and not guessing whether you're actually stopping to let me answer or not. So I prefer Zoom. I love it this way. Being able to actually see someone as I'm having the conversation makes things a little bit easier. So I love it.
That makes two of us. So you know what, Ryan? This is it from now on, called the new norm. All right?
One of the few times I'm okay with that term.
All right, well, good. Well, remember, I'm 57 years of age, and I had to learn a lot of new norms in a very condensed period of time. I'm not like guys like you that have been brought up with it and have more years to benefit from this thing called knowledge or technology.
Well, you do what you can. I think you're getting a pretty decent grasp on it so far, though.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm learning, and I'll tell you what, Ryan, it's becoming a lot more fun, that's for sure. So, with that said, you have a big plate of stuff, so why don't you go right to it?
Yeah, we have quite the plate of information. I mean, after, let's just call it the my podcast this week was I nicknamed the infirmary ward after all of the mass amount of injuries that happened in week 2. It was just it was a massacre especially in terms of fantasy. Starting off, Devontae Adams is still not practicing after tweaking his hamstring in the game on Sunday. So from what I'm seeing, it looks like he may not be available for this week. They're going to try, but for right now, I think your best options for Green Bay in terms of wide receivers are going to see if you can find either Allen Lazard or Marquez Valdes-Scantling on waivers. I think that's your best option at this point. Two other, and I didn't have this in our notes, but two other wide receivers who just came out, like since I sent you my notes, that did not practice today are Julio Jones, who's also dealing with the hamstring injury, and then obviously Michael Thomas still is not practicing with his ankle injury. I mean, that was, again, they figured 2 to 4 weeks, possibly even 6 with that ankle injury. So, I mean, we are somewhat expecting the Thomas news, but Julio Jones, again, tweaked his hamstring a little bit in week 2, which is why, again, Calvin Ridley had an absolutely explosive week. Now, I'm not expecting the same thing out of Calvin Ridley this week. He's not quite to the same extent because of playing the better defense in Chicago after going up against a depleted secondary in Dallas and a let's just say a not so great secondary in Seattle that was basically playing prevent defense after taking a big lead. So, moving on, AJ Green says he is almost back in a game shape. Which, I mean, let's be honest. He had missed almost 2 full years of playing time. He had missed all of last season and hadn't played since December the year before. So he had been out for basically 21 months. The fact that he is, after only 2 weeks of the games, actually finally getting back into game shape is very promising. Now, again, this is a guy that's had a riddled injury history over the last 4 or 5 years.
Right.
So we'll see what that means in terms of his actual production. If he's actually, getting better separation from defenders, how crisp his routes are. We'll see what kind of a rapport he can develop with Joe Burrow. Now, it hasn't been great. I know they said that they were working on their rapport in the offseason. Haven't really seen that come to fruition yet, but the fact that the AJ Green is finally getting there back into game playing shape really is promising for what this offense needs in order to be competitive. Okay. Jack Doyle, tight end, is back at practice today. We'll see if it's enough for him to actually play this Sunday. Even if he does play, they may limit him, especially with how effective Mo Alley Cox was this last week. The former, I want to say he went to VCU as a basketball player. Mo Alley Cox was one of my top tight end pickups for this week in terms of waivers. If Jack Doyle coming back to practice is promising, but he's not quite as explosive. He's more of a blocker type who can get loose, kind of a Will Dissly type. when I think of Will Dissly, I think he's kind of that Jack Doyle type. Not quite as athletic, but big, brawny, and able to get some tough yards. Jack Doyle, if he's back, is going to take away a little bit of the upside of Mo Alley Cox and the great game they had last week. I want to say it was 5 catches on 6 targets for 111 yards. Those are not Jack Doyle numbers. Jack Doyle numbers are 6 targets, 4 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown. And so I think if Jack Doyle comes back, it's going to eat a little bit into Mo Alley Cox. I think the Mo Alley Cox breakout is going to eat in a little bit to Jack Doyle. So because of that, I'm kind of separating those two. I don't necessarily like the tight end grouping right now in Indianapolis, either one as a fantasy option, until we can actually see how they work together, if one can actually really separate from the other. So next up, James White still absent from the team, which is completely understandable. I'm sure you mentioned this on some of your shows, just with what happened, finding out hours before the game on Sunday. It was weird as a fantasy community, just all of a sudden never having a single injury report, that he was completely healthy. He was a guy that I had ranked a little bit higher for this week, simply because Seattle tends to struggle with pass catching running backs.
Mm-hmm.
As we saw, they had a hard time with Burkhead in that game. And to find out that it was for personal reasons because of his father dying in that car wreck and his mother still in critical condition. Yeah. As of right now, he is still absent from the team, has not been practicing. So, I mean, obviously he is going to be ruled out for this next week. And which is completely understandable. And so we hope that he is able to get some peace and some closure with his family through this tragedy. So
yeah, so sad. To think that New England competed as well as they did. We'll get to the game in a little while against Seattle, but if you have a guy like James White, who you marvel as a player, not only as a runner, but a lateral threat coming out of the backfield, a guy that can catch the football. And he's done it in the Super Bowl as well. Can you imagine how much more potent New England would have been against Seattle in a game where a lot of points were scored? But let's face the reality. Personal reasons along these lines take priority. So rest in peace, and peace with you, James White. Hope you come back when you're feeling ready to do it. And everybody is praying for you. I mean, that is really sad. Yeah, it really is.
What was actually what was somewhat surprising to me was actually that it came out that Robert Kraft actually offered James White to fly him out immediately to Florida. And James White actually decided to stay. He stayed in Seattle. I'm sure he was in contact with relatives over the phone, stayed in his hotel for the game, and then actually flew back with the team to New England and then down to Florida. So like you were saying, very sad, thoughts and prayers obviously with James White and his family. Back into fantasy, Josh Jacobs has not practiced the last couple days. So he did not practice on Wednesday and Thursday. That is somewhat concerning. However, due to his status as basically the workhorse back in that offense, and really the star of that offense, other than maybe Darren Waller, if he even gets back to practice at a limited basis on Friday, he should be fine for the matchup on Sunday. So definitely something to watch for. I have him, I've got him in a couple of leagues, and so definitely something to watch for. I think I have him as my running back 9 this week, going up against New England, who got gouged for 150 yards and 5.1 yards per carry against Seattle this last weekend. So there are definitely yards to be had out there if Josh Jacobs is healthy. George Kittle said he is going to try to play. He's actually got a bone bruise on the same knee that he has his MCL sprain on. So extremely painful, something to watch for. If you have George Kittle, we saw last week, again, Jimmy Garoppolo or whoever is in this offense, even when it was Mullins, 2 years ago as the quarterback taking over for Garoppolo when he tore his ACL. love throwing to the tight end. Love throwing to the tight end in this offense. The wide receivers are more gadget players in this offense with Kyle Shanahan than they are true wide receivers. It's running backs and tight ends. And so if George Kittle can't play, be prepared to play Jordan Reed. And I know that's a weird thing to say after the massive amount of injuries and concussions he has had over the years and so much time missed. But as a backup, he is very much now in that role that Vernon Davis was for years behind Jordan Reed over in Washington, where you didn't play Vernon Davis. Vernon Davis was just he was waiver wire fodder. However, if Jordan Reed went out, you better pick up Vernon Davis because he's going to score you, 30. He's probably going to get you 30, 40, 50 yards and has a possibility of a touchdown. And so that's the same case going this week. If George Kittle can't play, Jordan Reed is a sneaky play for tight end. So definitely one to watch. I know that he was one of the top tight ends to watch on the waivers this week. So another one, Curtis Samuel could see a little more usage in this Carolina offense. A lot of this actually comes because of Christian McCaffrey's injury. McCaffrey, again, as we all know, is used a lot in the run game, obviously, but also in the pass game. Just his phenomenal athleticism, able to get him all over the place. Curtis Samuel kind of had that same sort of pedigree, I guess you could say, that same sort of style of play when he was with Ohio State and when he was drafted out of Ohio State. So he has that same sort of play style. They're still going to use, Carolina's still going to use, I believe, Mike Davis as their main running back. But I think that Curtis Samuel is going to be the kind of guy that they run more in the slot, use kind of on those dump-off type passes, maybe even put him in the backfield on passing downs and play him out that way. So I definitely think that Curtis Samuel is an intriguing option in deeper leagues, 14, 16, 18 team leagues as a flex option. Maybe not this week to kind of wait and see what his usage will actually be, but weeks after if it looks like he's getting plenty of usage. And then the last major point that I had on my notes, Zach Moss not practicing for the second straight day. This could mean a very big workload for Devin Singletary. Now, I understand that the Rams have played pretty good so far against running backs. That being said, Singletary not only can run the ball, he also is very good at catching the ball out of the backfield. Josh Allen seems to trust him catch the ball out of the backfield, and so he has definitely got it with increased usage. Could be a very sneaky play again, and could find his way up into mid to upper running back 2 type numbers for this week if he gets a decent workload. So.
All right, let me go over some things here. First of all, DJ Chark out tonight. Jaguars versus the Dolphins. That's a big loss of the Jaguars.
Yeah, it is. We'll kind of see how to go about this. I'm trying to keep an eye on the game as it goes. Even with Chark out, he hasn't been a. It's not that he hasn't been a huge part of the game plan, but I believe he only has 5 or 6 receptions so far on the season, 100 yards and a touchdown. So it's not as big as we may have been expecting from him to start the season. They're doing a good job of getting the rookie Laviska Shenault involved. Keelan Cole, he was kind of a back and forth player the last couple years.
Right.
Have these explosive games and then kind of disappear for 2 to 3 weeks, and then have an explosive game, then disappear. So for me, if you're looking for more safety in this offense, it looks like Keelan Cole is more like the safety guy. If you need something, if Chark misses more time than just this week, it helps that he has the extended week until the next game. But if he misses more time than this, I think that Shenault is probably the higher ceiling. He also may be the lower floor guy, but I think he's going to be the higher ceiling if you're looking for an explosive wide receiver for your fantasy matchups.
Sounds good. All right, let's talk about Damon Snacks Harrison is going to visit the Seattle Seahawks in your backyard. Are there enough places for him to eat in Seattle?
Yes. um, there are. Let me put it this way: There's enough places that deliver. There's enough Uber Eats and that sort of thing that there's plenty of places where he's going to still be able to get enough food to keep the nickname up. So the Seahawks need some help up front. I mentioned earlier that their defensive secondary has been getting eaten alive.
Right.
Part of that is it's not a lot of that isn't necessarily the defensive back's fault. The fact that the Seahawks don't really have a pass rush and are a little weak up the middle in terms of stopping the run, we don't have a whole lot of depth on our defensive line. And then we also and then with that we end up losing Bruce Irvin to a torn ACL for the year.
Right.
So the lack of pass rush, no one's getting to the quarterback. I mean, even Jamal Adams is getting to the quarterback, but not able to bring him down. And so it's hard for even the best corners to guard for 7 seconds.
Right.
And so because of that, it's made a little bit of an issue. So I think having someone like Snacks who can play nose tackle, maybe move a couple of our guys around a little bit, like Poona Ford plays more up the middle. Jerron Reed plays up the middle but can play outside almost like a little more of a 5 technique and maybe move a little bit back and forth so that he has been known to be able to rush the quarterback. I believe one year he actually had finished with 9.5 sacks 2 years ago. So he's a guy that can get to the quarterback, but he needs other help with run stoppage and around the outside. So,
well, I know for a while they wanted Jadeveon Clowney, but Jadeveon Clowney was too expensive for a guy who was not productive with them. And I think really, to me, is headed more toward the downside of his career. So I think Snacks Harrison should be a pretty good economical option. And you know what? This could be a win-win for both of them. He has an opportunity if he signs right away to play 13 games, maybe 14 if they get him in quick enough. And they could use help, that's for sure. But I wouldn't have spent the amount of money Jadeveon Clowney was asking. And look how long Clowney stayed out there until the Titans finally did sign him to a deal.
Yeah, and even then, I think the Titans actually may have signed him for a little bit less than what the Seahawks originally offered.
Right.
And then once it got to the point where he was like, I don't want to sign for this much, they moved on to other things. And then when it came down to it, they brought their offer down because no one's demanding that much. So we're not going to pay what you want. We're not even going to pay what we originally offered. If you want a job, we'll give you only this much. And so because of that, yeah, he ends up signing with the Titans. Clowney's more apt in the run game than he is as a straight pass rusher. He can cause a lot of havoc. Partially because he gets double teamed a lot, which allows for other guys to get into the quarterback. But in terms of straight sack numbers, they're just not there.
Oh, I agree. I wouldn't have paid the money for Clowney, and he went through a few agents along the ways until he landed in Nashville for sure. So
True.
this goes to show you he outpriced himself for what he ended up pricing, and I wonder how effective he'll be with Tennessee to begin with. So let's talk about your thoughts about a game you're all too familiar with. In boxing, they call it a heavyweight bout. In Seattle, we'll call it a primetime battle between the Seahawks and the New England Patriots, the Russell Wilson, Cam Newton show. That was one heck of a football game, wasn't it, Ryan?
Oh, my word. I mean, it was crazy because, I mean, with how late the games are, I've got 3 little kids, and trying to get them down to sleep. I'm up in their bedroom trying to get them down while still having the game on my phone and watching it on my phone, dimming down the screen as much as possible, trying not to yell and scream and have a heart attack, trying to get them to sleep, my 8-year-old, 5-year-old, and 3-year-old, as Cam Newton is driving down the field while the Seahawks are up by 5.
Right.
And just knowing we're going to lose this game. The Seahawks are going to lose this game. And it coming down to a run, the exact same run that they had run 4 times at the goal, or 3 times at the goal line with Cam Newton already.
Right.
I think if the if the Patriots had been a little more creative on that play, they would have won it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just the attack back and forth. Julian Edelman getting loose deep multiple times. It helped that Diggs got ejected in what was it, like the first or early second quarter
Right.
for targeting, for helmet to helmet hit. So, this is the kind of game that I'm expecting the Seahawks to be in a lot. We talk about it. Everyone talks about let Russ eat, especially up here. Everyone wants let Russ cook, let Russ cook. And really, while you could say they let him cook in this game, it wasn't necessarily that they were doing anything out of the ordinary from what they did last year. They actually ran the ball more than they passed the ball in this game. It just so happened that when they passed the ball, it was explosive, and they made fools of what last year's number one defense was. They allowed four passing touchdowns to wide receivers last year. The New England Patriots, the whole season. They got 5 wide receiver touchdowns in this past game from Russell Wilson. And so I think just the dangerous offense that this has become for Seattle, because Chris Carson still had a decent game. Again, the running game went for over 150 yards. Plus, they've got Carlos Hyde, who was a 1,000-yard rusher last year. The tight ends aren't necessarily being utilized as much because I think our wide receiver core has grown enough with, DK Metcalf, who's just becoming a monster. There are a lot of comparisons that he may be the next Julio Jones, just based on size and speed. And then you've got Tyler Lockett, who's an absolute speedster and technician from the slot. This is a dangerous offense that is going to be it's going to be very, very hard to stop. And then you go back to Cam Newton. He got really overlooked this year, especially in fantasy drafts. I was happy to pick him up, and I think I've got him in 3 of my 5 leagues, because he's got Bill Belichick as his coach.
Right.
And they're going to do their best to create opportunity for Cam Newton to work and to do what he does. And that has been obvious that Cam Newton, I think, will win Comeback Player of the Year this year.
No doubt about that. Yeah.
And even if he only plays like 3/4 of what he did in that game against Seattle, I think that he is going to have a phenomenal season. He's going to really help out a lot of fantasy owners that took the chance and drafted him.
Well, let me tell you, the Patriots and the Seahawks have had some pretty good games, and you're only talking about one play where the Patriots went to the well one too many times the obvious way. Anything slightly different over what they would have done, and the New England Patriots would have come back to Foxborough with another win. But when you go to the well one too many times, and again, we can all second guess arguably the greatest coach of all time, anything they'd be looking at 2-0. But that was a slugfest, and that was a heck of a football game. It really was.
Yeah, and one of the stats that I heard, I think it was from, who was it? I want to say it was, I can't remember now. But Bill Belichick was actually quoted as saying, "I'm glad we only have to play him once every 4 years." In terms of Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson now against the New England Patriots, if you include the Super Bowl, is now 3-1, averaging over 30 points a game, a QB rating of 120, and has thrown for, I want to say, 12 touchdowns and I think it's 12 touchdowns and 2 or 3 and 3 interceptions. I mean, and that is against arguably the greatest coach of all time.
Yeah. Well, like I say, once every 4 years. I think he figures he's seen enough. Let's go over a few other things. I want to talk about some football games this weekend. Tale of 2 running backs. Leonard Fournette looking awfully good with the Bucs. Christian McCaffrey is going to be taking some time off for some unfortunate behavior. Nothing that he did wrong. It's just the physicality and the control of the game took its toll on Mr. McCaffrey. Let's lead off with Fournette first. Obviously, the first game he had 5 carries for practically no yards, and then of course he got reacclimated in week 2. Bear in mind, we can't lose sight of the fact there was no preseason for these guys to get going. So Fournette had a a little bit of time to prepare for the Panthers. So let's begin with Fournette.
Yeah, Fournette, I think it was just a matter of time before he took over that role from Ronald Jones. Bruce Arians can blow as much smoke as he wants that Ronald Jones was their guy. Fournette is just a better running back than Ronald Jones. Has been. Ronald Jones the last 2 years, was last year's rookie year, the year before? I think it was the year before was his rookie year. And people have tried to hype him up as being the guy. He is going to take the role, and he's just never been able to do it. Never been able to find the running lanes, never been able to really break out in terms of outside the outside the tackles, stretching the ball, catching the ball out of the backfield. He's just never really been able to have those solid games. And Fournette took complete advantage this last week. It was good to see that he's got a team that believes in him, that's going to use him. I think that he has officially taken over the starting role, that he is going to be the main running back in that offense.
Right.
And if the passing game can really get going with Tom Brady and the wide receivers that they've got, Fournette is going to have a ball. I think he's going to have a really good season because of how much focus is going to have to be on the passing game.
Yeah, that's and unfortunately the downside for Carolina is that they had enough problems with a brand new coach and a new quarterback. Their biggest weapon, Christian McCaffrey, unfortunately, goes down to an injury.
Yeah, I mean, Christian McCaffrey was. He was. A lot of people wondered if something like this was going to happen simply because of the fact that he is used so much in that offense, and. There was a lot of people that you see these websites, especially for fantasy, that injury predictors, what are the percentage chance that someone's going to get injured during the season, have to miss significant time, and people use those to argue that they're right, that no, this is why I don't take this guy here. People are arguing about Saquon Barkley after getting injured last year, and then just knowing the workload that he was going to have to put in because he is the main guy in that offense. You can't predict injury, period. I don't care what the workload is. You just can't predict injury. You can say that it's likely to happen, and you could be proven right, but you could also be proven wrong. So, just a tough match there. I think that he will come back. The issue is if he's out 6 weeks. And or even if he's out 4 weeks, and at that time the Panthers are 0-6, how much do they actually run Christian McCaffrey out there? Do they just keep going with it in terms of their offense to just continue to try to grow some chemistry, which they kind of did last year. The Panthers were out of it, and Christian McCaffrey was still catching 8 balls out of the backfield and running 15 to 20 times in the game. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes, especially with the new coach, new offensive coordinator, and a few more weapons on the offense as well.
Yeah, my guess is that if this thing gets out of control for the Panthers, especially during COVID-19, I would think you might want to shut him down a little. One thing I want to do right now is this. You got a hat, and I got one, and I'm going to bring this hat on a little bit later in the broadcast, okay, and I'll tell you what the significance. That's why I went back there to get it, because I got to match my hat with yours, okay? So there you go. So the 2 hat men tonight. So now we'll talk about tonight's games. Ryan, I want to talk about some other key matchups this week, if I may, including the one that's going on right now. Miami Dolphins and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Gardner Minshew on the national stage against Ryan Fitzpatrick. I know we're talking about the beard and the stash. I don't know what the score of this game is. Maybe you do. I'm just having too much fun with my microphone and my new toy here called the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. What's the update on that?
Right now, the beard is beating the stash. The beard is 6 for 6 for 68 yards and a touchdown. The stash is 2 for 3 for 26 yards. And so right now it is 14-0 Miami.
Okay.
And so I was a little bullish on Gardner Minshew just with how the defense had been playing for Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have a couple of really good corners. However, I believe Byron Jones actually was injured and wasn't playing this week. And so I think that for me, that opened up opportunity, especially considering the last two teams have absolutely run over Miami, just throwing the ball all over them. So I thought that Gardner Minshew could have been in for a good game. So far, that has not proven the case. I think we're just into the second. No, we've got 40 seconds left in the first quarter. So yeah, Miami's up 14-0. I think that the Jaguars can get it going. I'm not a believer in the Dolphins and what they can do offensively. They can be explosive offensively. I don't really believe in their defense. I mean, right now they give up the third most points to quarterbacks, the third most points to wide receivers. And they're middle of the pack in terms of giving up points to the running backs in fantasy. So really the points are out there to be had. It's just a matter of can Gardner Minshew keep it going, the streak that he's had for the last couple weeks.
Yeah, it's been awfully good, but I'll tell you, because you're telling me he's off to a tough start. So with that said, let's talk about the team I'm all too familiar with, and I have been for 57 years. And the last time they ever won a championship was on my birthday 5 years before I was hatched, December 29th, 1957. And they did it that year with an 8-4 regular season record. Okay, the Detroit Lions, they got toasted by the Packers, but I think there's a bigger picture there. 4 straight games where they've given up a double-digit lead, NFL record for all the wrong reasons. And I'll tell you what, I predicted on a couple of our broadcasts, Ryan, that they would lose quite big to the Packers. I don't have to brag about it. It's not like it takes a rocket scientist to figure it out. In fact, with Steve Ballesteri on the Sports Exchange on Wednesday, not this past Wednesday, leading into the game, I felt was like a 41-17, 41-14, 42-21, still 3 touchdowns. Well, first of all, two-headed question here. Your thoughts about the way the Lions went ahead and played against the Packers, and then I'll have to give you the old evil one from Arizona.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised to see that they were up 14-0 in that game. I was like, hey,
was it 14-0, 14-3?
Or maybe it's 14-3. 14-3. You're right.
Okay.
And so I was pleasantly surprised. Like, hey, I kind of like this. As a person who is not very high, on the Green Bay Packers. Sorry, Candy. I think that it doesn't help that they didn't have their top wide receiver in Kenny Golladay. They're struggling a little bit on offense. I've not really been a big believer on Matt Patricia in terms of a player personnel type guy. He struggles to keep a bit of consistency with the defense.
Right.
I mean, they'll have some really solid games where where they're stopping up a team that you wouldn't expect.
Right.
And then when it comes down to it, a really tough division game, they're just getting absolutely blown out. And so I'm not a big believer in Matt Patricia. I think Matt Patricia was a product of the great talent scouted by Bill Belichick. And you look at a lot of Bill Belichick's coaching tree is not all that successful.
Sure. Daniel Strugger, Romeo Crennel, Charlie Weiss, just to name a few. None of them have gone on to do anything. I think Brian Flores will actually be okay in Miami once he gets the talent. But you can't just sit there and be from Bill Belichick and expect to wear the same hoodie, and dress the same way. Otherwise, we might as well bring in Xerox into the picture and copy every one of these bad boys.
Well, isn't Bill O'Brien also from the?
Yeah, he is too. And I'll tell you what, when you think about Bill O'Brien, you talk about Carlos Hyde going up to Seattle. That was yet another boneheaded move by Bill O'Brien, and he's going to be a victim of some of his bad decisions this offseason. So, and you guys will be the benefactor of it with Hyde. Well, getting back to a point that you're right. I mean, the decision to let Jim Caldwell go after they had gotten to the playoffs and were right near it. Jim Caldwell was the first Lions head coach since Joe Schmidt. Yes, we know you weren't born then. Okay, the old age card. Okay, back in the 70s, to lead this team to a winning record in his career, full-time coach. I'm not talking about part-time guy, because if I want to go to part-time, Gary Moeller was 4-3 before Matt Millen let him go in favor of Marty Mornhinweg, and we know how that worked out, or it didn't work out.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, and Matt Patricia's under a lot of fire. So what happened, I think, up in Green Bay was expected. What happened in Chicago, when you give up a 21-point lead, you play for 3 quarters, you waste away a talent like Matt Stafford, which they are doing. That's why Barry Sanders left earlier, not because of this regime. Calvin Johnson and a lot of guys want the first ticket out. I actually like Jim Schwartz as a head coach, too. He just inherited a tough situation and took the brunt of the Rod Marinella era. But Jim Schwartz wasn't a bad coach. But staying on point with Patricia, Ryan, yeah, I don't think he'll last a lot longer now, especially with new ownership. But let's go ahead and summarize your thoughts about the Packers-Lions, because then we're going to talk about the Lions and the Cardinals, and I have a couple movies that we're not going to like talking about when we're going to describe what's going to happen out in the desert.
Yeah, so I think I expected more out of the passing game from the Packers. I wasn't expecting them to use the running game quite as much. And so I personally was a bit disappointed, because I had Aaron Rodgers ranked a bit higher in my rankings for this last week. And so, obviously I think that the Lions are a team that can be had, especially in the run game. And so when they go up against teams like the Packers, Aaron Jones is going to be a guy you're going to want to have in your lineups, period. So, and so that's kind of where I'm at with the Lions. I think the Packers proved that they didn't need Devontae Adams in order to win. And so I think that the Packers are still in good shape. It's just, like I said, it's a shame to see what's happening in Detroit with guys like Matthew Stafford having basically their careers wasted.
Yeah, I mean, now let's look ahead to Sunday against the Cardinals. I can see the Cardinals putting up a 45 or 50 spot against the Lions. I'm not going to blame the Lions' issues on Kenny Golladay missing, okay? They brought in Adrian Peterson, who's done a good job. They have the potential for a decent running attack. They have some pretty workable wide receivers, Marvin Jones Jr. There's a few weapons there. The Lions just simply can't stop anybody. And when you have that 3-headed monster out in Arizona with Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, and Larry Fitzgerald, and if the Cardinals could put any kind of a running game together, I think you're looking at a 45 or 50 spot against the Lions. And if the Lions got lost to the Packers by 21, I could see this thing getting as ugly as 21 to 28 points in a one-sided contest out in the desert. It's going to get ugly. I mean, Kyler Murray's treating the NFL like his own PlayStation game out there. Like, this is so effortless for this kid. He's just an unbelievable talent against a Lions defense, which is Steve Ballesteri would tell me, my New England Patriots guy, that Matt Patricia said bend but not break, but they're breaking a lot. He said that the New England Patriots gave up a lot of yards. Well, giving up a lot of yards and then committing costly penalties, that's a recipe for disaster. And unfortunately, it's going to get ugly for Detroit and Arizona. And if you think that's bad enough, when they take on the New Orleans Saints, they can end up being 0-4. And I'm wondering whether that may be a possibility time for a coaching change when you have a bye week. And I think, this is just my own opinion, and you being a Seattle guy, my gut feeling, okay, and we'll talk about this in a few weeks if it happens, is if the Lions continue to go on a massive wreck that they're on right now, I do believe that Patricia is gone after 4. Darrell Bevell could be your head coach. Give him an opportunity for 12 games. See if he can prove himself. What do you have to lose anyways? And let him audition for the job. It's not uncommon for guys to have interim jobs to show like there's a potential, you have a good in-house candidate. What do you have to lose? You're losing anyways, right? But the bye week is generally the time to make a coaching change. This is just my opinion. Will it come to fruition? I don't know. We'll keep it interesting for our listeners and viewers in the next few weeks. But that's something where, for Detroit, it's going to get ugly, not only Sunday, but against New Orleans. And if I get credential for the Jaguars game against the Lions, I don't even know if I'm going to make the trip or not. I'll certainly see it one way or the other. Things not looking good back home in Detroit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that Detroit's in for a tough one with this one. I mean, they're really Detroit is really susceptible to the run game, as we saw with Aaron Jones.
Right.
And the Cardinals have a decent pair of running backs in Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds.
Right.
Both of them are extremely talented, and I think that Chase Edmonds on a different team could be a starter. I mean, he could be a starter on half the teams in the league. And so, with the passing game, what it is, I think that's going to create enough issues that, again, I think that those two running backs are just going to run all over the Detroit defense this week. So, and Kyler Murray is going to be throwing around a bit as well and running for yards himself. So I think that, yeah, Kyler Murray is going to be in for a decent game. I'm not expecting this one to be extremely close.
Yeah, I think Kyler Murray will have. He can graze all over the football field. He'll be grazing on lions, is what I think. So, with that said, okay, let's talk about Candy's team, the Green Bay Packers and New Orleans Saints. Certainly good enough to be in prime time on Sunday. I kind of like the idea of a later game because I get to go out to my favorite sports bar and watch the Lions get hammered by the Cardinals, and I have a chance to sleep in that day. So, why don't you give me your thoughts about the Packers and New Orleans?
This could be an interesting matchup. The Packers have been susceptible to giving up, especially fantasy points, to running backs and wide receivers. Their defense has been struggling. I mean, obviously even though they trounced the Lions, they were still giving up points to the wide receivers.
Right.
And so I think that because of the offense of the Saints, you've got Alvin Kamara. You don't have Michael Thomas. However, you still do have a couple of weapons in Emmanuel Sanders and Traquan Smith. And Traquan Smith actually did a good job of stepping up this last week. We'll see if he can do it again. That's been one of my biggest concerns with Traquan Smith as a fantasy asset, is that he's had big games, even when Michael Thomas was there. And then Michael Thomas may miss a game, or they'll get up by a whole bunch and Michael Thomas will pull out. And then Traquan Smith does nothing for the next 6-7 weeks. And then he has another breakout game and then does nothing for the rest of the season. And so he had a decent game this last week. I want to say it was like six catches on 8 targets, somewhere in there, for about 75 yards.
Right.
That's a decent game for a guy who's stepping in for Michael Thomas. And so going up against Green Bay, I think the opportunities will be there for him. I'm not expecting a huge game out of Drew Brees. Just, again, Michael Thomas isn't there.
Right.
That's his main guy. And so
right.
I've moved down Drew Brees in my rankings a little bit for this week. So, I mean, as far as the Saints go, I've moved Drew Brees down a little bit. I'm bumping up Sanders just a touch, not much, but just a touch. Traquan Smith a little bit. Alvin Kamara is going to be one of my top. He may even be my number one running back this week. As far as Green Bay goes, going up against that Saints defense, the Saints give up a lot to the quarterbacks and to the tight ends, but they've actually been somewhat stingy against running backs and wide receivers.
Right.
And so, looking at a couple of I want to say the two quarterbacks that the Saints have gone up against have been Tom Brady, who got some points in, who got a few points in garbage time when they were just getting hammered, but did score, really early against the Saints in week 1. And then last week, of all people, Derek Carr throwing all over the Saints was quite interesting. So, they've shown some susceptibilities in the passing game. I think that, but again, I think a lot of that has to do with the tight ends.
Right.
Both of those offenses utilize times. OJ Howard had a touchdown week 1. Darren Waller just went all over them in week 2. So, we'll see if Green Bay actually gets the tight ends involved in this game. I think they've got Robert Tonyan and Jay Sternberger. Sternberger's the guy that we've expected to kind of, get going a little bit since Jimmy Graham left, and we haven't seen that yet. So, it'll be interesting to see what the Green Bay Packers can do in this game. I still like Green Bay over the Saints personally, because I'm not so sure that offense can really get it going without Michael Thomas.
Oh, no question. I see the Packers winning by 6 points in this game. I think it'll be close. I think it'll be a lot of fun. 2 future Hall of Fame quarterbacks. I guess one would really wonder whether or not, if Devin Funchess had not decided not to opt out, whether he would have been a viable option, but we'll never know anyhow. But I think the Packers over the Saints by 6. We'll go into a few more games here, and then we'll be able to wrap this bad boy up, okay? Las Vegas at New England. Obviously, Las Vegas pulled out a win against, lo and behold, the Saints. But I think they're going to get hammered out in New England. I think Cam Newton was angry that he lost that football game to Seattle, and I think he takes it out on the Raiders and John Gruden. Although I know that Henry Ruggs is a guy to look out for down the road. There's nothing worse than an angry Cam Newton who's getting more and more used to this offense with Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels. So what are your thoughts about this contest?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that the Patriots are going to take a little bit of frustration from that loss to Seattle out on the Raiders. I think the Raiders can keep this competitive. Looking at what the Patriots do on defense, they really struggled against wide receivers this last week. And I mean the Seahawks. I mean, it was amazing to see what the Seahawks could do against Stephon Gilmore. I mean, DK Metcalf left Gilmore in the dust this weekend. And so seeing what the wide receivers can do against that defense, it'll be interesting to see if because of all the injuries for Vegas in their wide receiver core, they don't have a whole lot. I mean, it's, you've got 2 rookies, basically Ruggs and Edwards are your main, and then Hunter Renfrow in the slot. That's it. And I think they also have Nelson Aguilar as depth, and they've got one more guy, that again they've got some depth pieces. Zay Jones is the other guy that I was thinking of.
Right.
They got some depth pieces. They've got a lot. They basically have 5 role players, and no one really to step up. And so it'll be interesting to see what they can do. The fact that they have, Josh Jacobs, if Jacobs is healthy, I think that him playing this game is going to be big. Patriots are middle of the road in terms of giving up points to the running backs. So, and the Seahawks ran for, like I said, 150 yards, 5 yards a carry. So as long as they can get a little bit going with the pass game, especially to Darren Waller and even to the running backs out of the backfield, I think they'll keep it competitive. But I think that what the Patriots offense provides is going to be too much for Las Vegas to handle.
Yeah, I could see the Patriots winning by 10 points or more. I really do. I don't deal with point spreads a lot. If I were going to say that there would be a point total, I'm looking at the Raiders like 28-17 type of game. I really do. And, again, part of this might be contingent upon whether James White comes to play. We factor whether he's in or out, but I think Cam Newton is certainly getting used to the targets that he has. How can we not do a broadcast, Ryan, without mentioning Kansas City at Baltimore on next Monday night?
This is okay. So this is one of those games where it's going to be competitive. I don't see it being as explosive as some people are predicting. Because of how good Baltimore's defense is, and with what the Chargers defense was able to hold Patrick Mahomes to last week, I am down a little bit on Patrick Mahomes for this game.
Okay.
I have him down. Let me actually, I've got my rankings right here.
Okay.
I want to say that I have Patrick Mahomes as my quarterback, like 7 or 8 this week. I have him as my quarterback 5 for now, but I'm in the process of looking at moving him down a little bit just because this Baltimore defense is just absolutely brutal. They can handle running quarterbacks. They can handle stationary quarterbacks. And with how well Baltimore's offense runs in terms of running the ball, controlling the clock, they're going to be able to do a lot better job of keeping Mahomes off the field, like the Chargers were last week. That was what really helped them out, was the fact they used Austin Eckler and Josh Kelly so well, keeping the Chiefs off the field, so that not allowing them to get into a rhythm. If Baltimore does that, I see Baltimore winning this game. But again, I think it'll be competitive enough. I think that the The defense for the Chiefs is going to show up well enough to keep this competitive. It's not going to be a blowout either way. This could be a slug 'em out, not necessarily low scoring game.
Right.
Between these two, I think a low scoring game. It could be, say, 24-28. I could see that kind of a game. I don't see a 35-30 type game like we saw out of New England. And even though these are both powerhouse offenses, the defenses for both teams are a little bit better.
I'll get back to an analogy that'll tie with this. You're talking about Green Bay going to New Orleans. Well, the only cold air you're going to have in New Orleans is that thing called air conditioning, okay? Where if this game were being played up at Lambeau, even though we're still in September, Lambeau Field, it gets cold. You get real cold elements up in Lambeau, but here you have air conditioning. Why do I bring that into this game with the Ravens in Kansas City? Well, let's face the reality. Kansas City with fans at Arrowhead, a very loud place like you have up in Seattle, home field does matter in a case like this. But when you're in Baltimore, it's a different animal there. So I can see where home field, albeit fans or no fans, could make a difference. And I tend to agree with you that this game is going to be low scoring. But I'm looking at 24-21 either way. A field goal decides it.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to go either way. I just know that they've got a good game on Monday night to talk about.
I agree. I agree with you.
That you want to talk about that we haven't gotten to, or do you feel we've gotten over the main ones that you want to get to?
I think we've gotten over the main ones. One guy that I want to mention that I think isn't getting enough play, and I'm not sure how long you've been in Florida, but I know that you know this guy, Ryan Tannehill. Was not the problem in Miami.
Adam Gase was.
And he is, well, I mean, even before Adam Gase.
Mike Sherman.
The talent that Tannehill has around him now, and actually having a run game and an offensive line to protect him, he is putting up great. I mean, he has been almost, and in a couple cases, more efficient than Russell Wilson.
Right.
With what he's been able to do. I mean, last week putting up he threw for 4 touchdowns against Jacksonville.
Right.
He is doing that with Derrick Henry not being as explosive as he was last year. And so I like Tannehill. If he is available in your fantasy leagues, in 12-team leagues and bigger, you're not playing fantasy right. Right now he's the quarterback 10 in terms of total points scored. But looking at his schedule coming up, he is going to be putting up more points. He is going to be a very explosive and consistent quarterback with the passing options that he has with A.J. Brown once he's healthy. Corey Davis is showing up this year. It looks like Corey Davis might finally actually happen. I believe this is his contract year because I don't believe they picked up his 5th-year option. So this is his contract year. And then you've got Jonnu Smith, who's really coming around into his own now that he's got the job completely to himself with Delaney Walker gone. So, and then again, you can't forget the fact he has a solid offensive line and Derrick Henry running the ball.
Wow, Ryan Tannehill, I remember last year when I was playing fantasy ball during the playoffs, I ended up letting Jameis Winston go, and the person I ended up playing in the playoffs got him and beat me with him. But that wasn't the problem. Ryan Tannehill performed well then. Ryan Tannehill's a benefactor of a good coaching staff and an organization that believed in him, where the Miami Dolphins at that time were very dysfunctional, and they were ready to move on from him. Ryan Tannehill is a good quarterback. He's in a good situation, well coached.
Yeah.
So change of scenery is what helps him and makes him a wild card type of guy. So, I agree. I think if Ryan Tannehill's out there, he's certainly a good play. But, well, Ryan, I can tell you it's been an awful lot of fun doing this, and we're getting ready for our version of the new norm. So with that said, as we wrap up the broadcast, why don't you let everybody know how they can get a hold of you? I'll do the same, and then we can watch the Dolphins and the Jaguars if there's a game to really be watched. Go ahead, Brian. Take it away.
Well, you can find us. Our main spot, our main hub is our website, skullkingsports.com. You can email me, ryan.skolrud, that's ryan.skolrud, at skullkingsports.com. We are on social. If you look up Skull King Sports in the search bar on Facebook, you will find multiple groups, multiple pages that we are running to just get as much conversation out there, because we don't just cover football, fantasy football. We cover Major League Baseball. We cover NBA, NHL, racing, so NASCAR, Formula One, IndyCar. We're covering golf. We do have a little bit of coverage on UFC. So like I said, we're trying to cover as much as possible. So check us out at Skull King Sports, or at Facebook. We have multiple groups. Look up Skull King Sports. And then you can find us on Instagram, Skull King Sports, or on Twitter at Skull King Sports, or my personal Twitter, I believe, is Ryan Skolrud. And I think that is it.
And for those of you that wonder what hat this is, the University of South Florida Bulls. Okay, had to wear it. And I was hoping to get out of my COVID-19 cocoon with Florida Atlantic hosting USF. But one little problem about that game, they're not playing it because of COVID-19. USF went up to Notre Dame, got smoked 52-0. Notre Dame cancels the Wake Forest game. USF has to get tested, end up canceling, and all of a sudden I'm still stuck in my COVID-19 cocoon. But meanwhile, I'm wearing the Bulls hat. I think USF probably would have won this game in the Jim Levitt Bowl, or maybe Willie Taggart Bowl, or maybe the Glenn Spencer Bowl, and the Charlie Weiss Jr. Bowl. So a lot of connections between the two that never happened, but that's why I'm wearing my proud USF hat.
Well,
not to be or not to be, and that game was on my calendar for a while, just like the Lions and the Dolphins never happened. I don't know what's going to happen with the Lions and the Jaguars. Go ahead.
Part of the reason I'm wearing my Huskies hat is because the Pac-12 officially voted to play the season. They're going to start in November.
Very good. And my regular conference, the Big Ten, is going to be playing at some point. With that said, in terms of getting a hold of us, you can listen to this broadcast through Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. I'll say that again: Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to listen to it, feel free to subscribe to any of those or where you get your podcasts. As far as social media is concerned, you can follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. It's at Tribune South. Facebook and Instagram, follow us at South Florida Tribune. YouTube channel, this is where this broadcast is going to be, is on the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. We encourage you to subscribe for it, and you'll get every broadcast that we have on the South Florida Tribune on our very own YouTube channel. Enjoying doing these visual things. They're really fantastic. It's like something that you almost will become the new norm. Our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. You can go ahead and get all of our content from our writers, as well as our media distribution partners to broadcast. And we even have a section on there for Detroit fans. Since it's from my hometown, I like to run a lot of hometown stuff on there as well. Our email is southfloridatribune@gmail.com. And you can catch up with me on LinkedIn and Scott Morganross. So meanwhile, Ryan, I've really enjoyed this broadcast, whether it's me and you doing it by ourselves or whoever we decide to bring in. I feel that what we're going to do will be a lot more efficient now that we can do it together in this format. And I hope that everybody week in and week out tunes in and watches this broadcast, because this is something that's been a while in the making, but I'm glad we finally got to this point. So any closing thoughts, Ryan?
No, just hope everyone's able to have a solid weekend. Make sure, again, to go to Skull King Sports to check out our fantasy football rankings. Quick note, I am, as far as ranking accuracy, we actually do have that measured for our fantasy football rankers through Fantasy Pros. I am part of the Fantasy Pros accuracy competition right now. After 2 weeks, I am 50th overall out of 170 experts on there in terms of the accuracy of my rankings. We do have one guy with three guys that are part of our group that though they're not in the full competition, their scores have them at second overall in terms of accuracy after 2 weeks, 45th overall, and 43rd overall. So we're doing a pretty good job of trying to keep our rankings as accurate as possible, so you guys can make the best decisions for your fantasy teams.
Very impressive. And this is our third year working together, Ryan. We started with Peter Ween. We carried it over the South Florida Tribune, and now we're doing it again. So I love having you on the broadcast. Not only do you do well with fantasy sports, but you've also helped us a lot in terms of our coverage as well in other areas. So meanwhile, Ryan, looking forward to do this every week this way. And once again, you're listening to listening and watching. You gotta get used to that. Like the people with the Raiders have to get used to the Oakland Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders, but you're listening and watching Fantasy Football with Ryan Skolrud and myself, Scott Morgan Russell. On behalf of Ryan Skolrud at Skull King Sports, this is Scott Morgan Roth, the Motor City Madmouth, thanking you for watching, and we will catch you on the next edition of Fantasy Football with Ryan Skolrud and Scott Morgan Roth. Maybe with the Yusuf hat. I don't know. We'll see what happens with the hat of the day. We'll bring that up. Have a good night, folks, and enjoy your football weekend. Bye-bye.